It had about 6,000 people on a Sunday. It's still a large church, but
American churches followed one formula: build bigger, grow faster, attract more people. It worked, until it didn't. Joel Osteen's church became the largest in the country by perfecting that formula. A former basketball arena, giant screens, a message designed for mass appeal. But when the crowds stopped coming back, the system had no backup plan. What looks like a temporary dip is actually the beginning of something much bigger. For decades, American churches followed a simple formula: grow bigger, build larger, reach more people. And for a long time, it worked. By the early 2000s, Joel Osteen's Lakewood Church had perfected that formula better than anyone else. What began as a modest congregation in Houston transformed into something closer to a corporate operation. Not just a church, but a system, a brand, a machine designed for scale. The old rules of church no longer applied. Pews were replaced by stadium seating. Sermons were trimmed and polished. Worship became an experience. Screens, lighting, sound, everything engineered to feel modern, uplifting, and frictionless. And the results were impossible to ignore. Lakewood outgrew its building and moved into a former NBA arena. 16,000 seats, multiple services, tens of thousands attending every week, millions more watching from home. The parking lots needed traffic control. The bookstore moved more merchandise than many retail chains. The church paid off massive loans and generated revenue on a scale most towns never see. From the outside, it looked like proof. Proof that this model worked. Proof that growth meant blessing. Proof that bigger meant better. Other churches took notes. Across the country, megachurches followed the same blueprint: remove barriers, make faith comfortable, keep people coming back. Numbers became the scoreboard. Attendance became the evidence. But hidden inside that success was a quiet assumption, one no one questioned at the time: that if people showed up, something meaningful must be happening, and that assumption would eventually break everything. Because long before the seats went empty, the cracks were already forming beneath the surface. What if the problem wasn't that people stopped coming, but that they were never really staying in the first place? To understand why this collapse feels so shocking, you have to rewind to the moment when the system looked unbeatable. March 17th, 2019. Inside Lakewood Church, every seat is filled. 16,000 people sit shoulder to shoulder inside a former basketball arena. Giant video screens project Joel Osteen's face across the room. The worship band sounds like a stadium concert. The energy is electric. Outside, traffic directors wave cars into endless parking lines. Inside, coffee bars serve thousands. Volunteers move with precision. Everything runs on schedule. Nothing feels accidental. This is what success looks like in American Christianity. And Lakewood isn't alone. By this point, more than 1,600 megachurches operate across the United States. These aren't just churches, they're campuses. Some have food courts, some have gyms, some have water parks and climbing walls. They employ hundreds of staff members and bring in millions of dollars every year. The pastors become public figures. Their books dominate bestseller lists. Their sermons reach audiences in over 100 countries. They advise presidents. They appear on talk shows. Faith, packaged correctly, scales extremely well. Lakewood reports weekly attendance in the tens of thousands. Online viewership climbs into the millions. Even when critics raise concerns, the numbers seem to answer back. Growth becomes the defense. If something was wrong, no one could see it from this height. Because when a system rewards size, speed, and expansion, it stops asking harder questions. Questions about depth, about formation, about what happens when the crowd disappears. And in 2019, that question felt unthinkable.
But the higher the platform, the harder the fall. Because just beneath this peak, long before the pandemic, There was already proof that the formula didn't do what it promised. More than a decade before the seats started going empty, there was already evidence the system was failing. In 2007, one of the most influential megachurch leaders in America asked a dangerous question. Bill Hybels, founder of Willow Creek Community Church outside Chicago, had built the model everyone else was copying: seeker-friendly services, high production, comfortable faith, massive crowds. Willow Creek was the prototype. So Hybels commissioned a study, not to measure attendance, but to measure spiritual growth. He wanted to know if people were actually becoming more spiritually mature. The results stunned him. The data showed that increased church participation did not lead to deeper faith. People attended services, they joined groups, they volunteered, but many felt stuck, spiritually flat, like consumers, not disciples. In public, Hybels admitted it. The church had made a mistake. They had taught people how to attend, but not how to grow. They had built a system that worked best when people stayed dependent on the experience. It should have changed everything. Instead, it changed nothing. Because by then, the megachurch system was too large to slow down. Buildings had to be filled, staff had to be paid, budgets demanded constant growth. A model built on scale cannot afford depth if depth slows attendance. So the warning was ignored. The blueprint kept spreading. More campuses, bigger stages, cleaner messages. Faith became smoother, safer, and easier to consume. And from the outside, the system still looked healthy, but underneath the surface, something essential was missing. If the model was already hollow in 2007, what would happen when it faced real pressure? March 2020 didn't break the megachurch model, it exposed it. Across America, church doors locked almost overnight, not because leaders chose to close, but because they had no other option. Parking lots emptied, coffee bars shut down, children's programs stopped. The entire experience disappeared in a single week. For megachurches, this was supposed to be temporary. Leaders moved fast. Streaming services improved, cameras upgraded, online platforms expanded. Lakewood Church reached millions through screens. At one point, online views surged higher than ever before. From the outside, it looked like adaptation, but something unexpected happened inside people's homes. Without the crowd, without the lights, without the music swelling at the right moment, many viewers realized something uncomfortable. The message didn't change, but the impact did. What once felt powerful in a stadium felt thin on a laptop. Sermons blurred together, the same phrases, the same promises, the same structure week after week. When churches reopened, leaders expected relief. They expected a flood of people eager to return. Instead, attendance collapsed. Churches that once held 10,000 now welcomed 4. 5,000 dropped to 2. Entire sections of auditoriums stayed dark. At Lakewood, ropes appeared where people used to sit. And the numbers didn't bounce back. As restrictions lifted, attendance didn't recover, it kept falling. Because the pandemic didn't make people leave, it gave them space to notice what they'd been missing. And once people stepped away from the experience, many of them didn't walk back the same. For years, the megachurch experience was designed to feel powerful, but power feels different when you're alone.
Jennifer had attended a megachurch in Denver for nearly a decade. She never missed a Sunday. She volunteered. She gave. Church was part of her identity. But in November of 2020, she found herself watching the service alone on her laptop. The production was still there, the music still swelled, the message was still positive. But something was gone. Without the crowd reacting around her, she noticed the repetition. The same promises, the same structure, the same words she'd heard for years. For the first time, she asked herself what she was actually learning. So she stopped watching. Instead, she started reading,
listening to longer conversations, wrestling with harder questions. Eventually, she walked into a small church with fewer than 70 people. No screens, no stage, just quiet prayers and ancient words. And she realized what had been missing: depth. Jennifer's story isn't rare. Across the country, people who once made megachurches run, the volunteers, the givers, the organizers, quietly drifted away. Not in anger, not in protest, but in silence. Many didn't lose their faith. They lost their connection to the system that had shaped it. And when those people didn't return, the damage spread quickly. Because megachurches don't collapse when casual attendees leave. They collapse when committed people stop showing up. And by the time leaders noticed who was missing, the numbers told a far more serious story. By 2023, the decline was no longer anecdotal. It was measurable. Across the United States, megachurch attendance dropped by an average of 30 to 40% compared to pre-pandemic levels. Among young adults, the drop was far steeper. Nearly 60% attended less often or not at all. Lakewood Church was no exception. Before the pandemic, weekly attendance reached into the 40,000 range across multiple services. Today, the 16,000-seat arena no longer fills. Entire sections stay closed. Angles angle away from empty rows. What once required overflow now requires consolidation. And the impact goes beyond optics. When attendance falls, revenue follows. Staff positions disappear. Programs shrink. Churches built to operate at maximum capacity struggle to downshift. Systems designed for growth don't age gracefully. Saddleback Church faced the same reality. After Rick Warren stepped down, weekly attendance fell sharply. Layoffs followed. Ministries closed. The church that taught others how to grow now had to learn how to survive. Willow Creek declined even faster. Once drawing 25,000 people, it dropped to a fraction of that. Campuses closed. Associations dissolved. A movement unraveled. This wasn't about one pastor, or one city, or one scandal. It was the same pattern repeating across the country. Because when a model depends on constant momentum, it has no answer for slowing down. And once momentum breaks, control goes with it. But here's the part most people misunderstand. This collapse didn't happen because Joel Osteen failed. It happened because the system succeeded too well. It's easy to make Joel Osteen the face of this collapse. He's visible, he's wealthy, he's symbolic. But focusing on him alone misses the real story. Osteen didn't invent the megachurch system. He inherited it and perfected it. He understood media. He understood scale. He understood that in America, clarity and optimism travel farther than complexity. And by those rules, he won. Lakewood paid off a massive loan tied to its arena. The church even returned millions of federal relief funds after public backlash. Osteen himself stopped taking a salary from the church years ago, earning his wealth through books and speaking instead. By institutional standards, this wasn't failure. It was competence.
And that's the problem. The system rewarded presentation over formation, reach over roots, comfort over challenge. It created churches that functioned more like content platforms than communities. When the content moved online, the physical gathering lost its purpose. Technology finished what the pandemic started. People no longer needed a megachurch for polished sermons. The best speakers in the world were suddenly one click away. The system lost its advantage overnight. Younger generations felt it first. They wanted honesty, not perfection. Struggle, not slogans. A faith that acknowledged doubt instead of smoothing it over. The megachurch model wasn't built for that. So this isn't the story of a fallen pastor. It's the story of a successful system reaching its limit. Because when a system collapses quietly, the most important question isn't who failed, it's what comes next. The megachurch era isn't ending with a scandal, it's ending with silence.
Across America, massive church buildings still stand. The screens still work, the lights still turn on, but the energy that once justified their size is gone. Some congregations shrink and adapt. Others sell their buildings quietly. A few are converted into shopping centers or community spaces. The Crystal Cathedral was one of the first, a glass monument to religious optimism, sold after bankruptcy. What once symbolized the future became a warning. Lakewood hasn't closed. Joel Osteen still preaches. Millions still watch online. The system hasn't collapsed all at once. It's thinning, draining, losing density. And that's harder to notice. Because collapse doesn't always look like failure. Sometimes it looks like half-filled rooms that never refill. Staff quietly laid off. Programs reduced. Expectations lowered. Meanwhile, something else is happening out of frame. Smaller churches grow slowly. House gatherings multiply. Online communities replace buildings. Faith moves away from stages and back into conversations. Not louder, quieter, more fragmented, more uncertain. The megachurch promised certainty, a clear path, a winning formula. But formulas don't survive cultural shifts, and faith, it turns out, doesn't scale the way businesses do. So the question isn't whether Joel Osteen can stop this. It's whether anyone can rebuild something meaningful after the model that defined an era stops working. Because when the crowd goes home and the show ends, what's left behind matters more than what filled the seats. And no one knows yet what replaces it.